It's Thursday over here in Sydney. And if there are any Australians on the call, you will know that we often start big meetings like this by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands that we're calling in from. So I just want to quickly acknowledge the Garigal and Guyamagal people of the part of Sydney that I reside on, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. My background, so I spent 10 years in professional services as a lawyer and management consultant before coming across to the entrepreneurial space. I was a co-founder of a company called Future Super, which is a pension company in Australia focused on ethical and fossil fuel-free investing. I was there through to Series B capital raise. They're now up to Series C. And so in my entrepreneurial journey between that company and the others that I've worked in, I've seen the pre-seed through to Series D stage of growth. And now I run the Techstars accelerator here in Sydney, partnering with the New South Wales government. Do you want to jump in, Dave?
Yeah, thanks, Kirstin. I appreciate that. I'm based in Boulder, Colorado, and I guess we don't have as many wonderful traditions as you do. So I'll jump with the introduction. I'm the managing director of the Techstars Workforce Development Program. I'll share a little bit about that in a moment. I'm also a Techstars alum from 11 years ago, so it's the old days, as we call it now. So I'm a recovering founder, so I bring a lot of that perspective in. But for the Techstars Workforce Development, it's based in Denver, Colorado, in the U.S., but it is a hybrid program. We run portions in person in Denver and the remaining virtually. The thesis of the program is it's all about addressing challenges of the modern workforce and investing in innovative technologies and founders in that space. We're in program right now. I actually saw at least one founder from the program. John, I see you out there, Marquez, founder in the program. All the 12 companies in the program right now, the common thread between them all are they're all companies focused on maximizing human potential in some way. So it's career development, it's education development, it's accessibility, it's support, and all of those things. We are having our demo day on September 12th. We will live stream that for follow us on LinkedIn, and we'll go ahead and put that link on there soon. So you're welcome to join us there. And we also have applications opening for our spring session next week, I believe on the 26th. So already looking ahead towards the next class. Thanks everyone for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Slide sharing okay? You guys can see? All right, no one is shaking their head, so I'm going to assume that's a yes. Cool. Well, look, thank you so much. We're going to take you through a couple of pages with some thoughts around what this looks like at the early stage, as well as how hiring changes as the company grows. As Andre has already said, this is what we're going to cover. This is what you guys signed up for, so I won't sort of dwell on that too much. But before we start, I do want to take a moment to speak about culture. You're going to hear us mention culture a lot, team culture and the culture within your company. But you might be wondering why culture has such an important part to play when it comes to hiring. Startups, as you all know, are about building something that has never been built before. And that means there's no map for us to follow. There's no one who's telling us where we need to go. We need to figure that out for ourselves and with our teams. And so in this environment, the old command and control models of leadership, of team management don't work. And so you're going to be trying to build a team that can thrive in this new environment, rather than a team that is used to being given directions, clear directions of what to do. And that means you need to think differently about hiring, and you need to think differently about how to manage your team and how to empower them to create an environment that they can bring their best creative brains to help solve your biggest problems. Hiring is something that is spoken about a lot in the startup literature. So this is something from good to great. And I love this quote because it really just makes it sound so simple, but it obviously there's a lot more to it. So I don't really know where we should take this bus, but I do know this much. If we get the right people on the bus, the right people in the right seats, and the wrong people off the bus, then we'll figure out how to take it someplace great. And so our job on this call today is to help you start thinking about how you get the right people on your bus. All right. So
One of the
hiring,
challenges there, Kirsten, with Jim
yeah,
Collins' quote is at the very early stage, if we're including co-founders in this discussion, which I believe a lot of the Q&A will be, the bus may only have 1 to 2 seats. So it's not a tour bus just yet. And that's a big factor in who you're deciding to bring on the bus.
yeah, great point. All right. So my view of hiring in the early stages is that in a lot of ways, it's another type of selling. As a founder, selling your business, your vision is such an important skill to develop, and just as relevant in hiring as in winning new customers or winning investment. But when it comes to hiring people, you really only have these two things that you're trying to sell, and that's the dream and the team. So what do I mean by this? The dream is your purpose, your mission, the change that you want to create by building your product and building your company. The dream is also the dream that your business can one day be $1 billion company, and the equity that you're giving to your early employees in lieu of, a more commercial salary that they might be able to get somewhere else, might one day be worth a life-changing amount of money. So those two elements of dream, the vision and also the potential to be a really large company one day. On the team side, I'm talking about the opportunity, if you're a couple of people along or more advanced in your hiring journey, team is about the opportunity to work with other mission-aligned rock stars that you've recruited. But in the early stages, the team element is actually the opportunity to work with you as the founder. And that's something that a lot of founders, I think, really undersell in their early hires, is the opportunity to work with you really closely. If you're recruiting people who are used to working in a bigger scale up or even a bigger company, they probably meet the CEO or the founder in their business, once a week, once a fortnight, once a quarter, if you're in a really big company, maybe never. And so in your startup, they're going to be working with you day to day. And that is a huge advantage and a huge thing to be selling to your early team members. And so winning those great hires, you need to be great about selling the team as well as selling the dream. Dave,
I was gonna say with the I'm adding maybe a little bit of a challenges perspective of this. I completely agree you're selling the dream and the team, but you also have the responsibility of the balance of selling the realities of a startup and being transparent and honest about someone who has never been in a startup. Sell the dream, sell the team, but you also have to be really open about the reality that a lot of these things fail. And is the individual prepared to be on that rocky road? Some are not. It's better to find out early rather than get too far down the road. So sell the dream, sell the team, but be really open and honest about the realities of a startup if they've never done this before.
Yeah, great point. So what you're solving for when you're making these hires in the early stages, I tend to find with the founders I work with that they're making trade-offs across these two dimensions. So mission alignment is the first one. So how much is this new hire absolutely living and breathing to solve the problem that you and your business are setting out to solve? Either because they experience that problem themselves firsthand and they're passionate about fixing it, or they know someone who does. The other dimension that I see founders trading off is around proven skills versus, like an A+ generalist who is keen to grow. So when we're thinking about proven skills, that's, have they done this job before? Have they experienced this stage of growth before? Have they practiced their craft time and time again so that you know that you can have confidence that they can repeat it again here? The problem, of course, is that oftentimes proven skills cost more money than your startup has to pay in salary. And so you might be lucky and stumble across a mission-aligned, experienced expert in their craft who is willing to take a salary sacrifice to come and work for you in your startup. But I describe those people as unicorns. They are literally that rare. And so oftentimes you do have to make this trade-off when you're looking at your early stage hires.
How do you think about prioritizing those, Kirstin, the mission alignment versus the proven skills?
What a great segue. So what I find with this is how you balance between the two changes over time as your startup continues to grow. And like all good former management consultants, I have a 2x2 to talk you through this. And so if we map this on these two dimensions, you can see specialization along one side, generalist versus specialist. So a generalist, I think of someone who can do a little bit of everything, have a crack at whatever comes across their plate, do a pretty reasonable job and learn quickly, versus a specialist is someone who's quite deep in their craft. And then along the bottom axis there, you can see mission alignment. So higher on the left and lower on the right. And so in the early stage of a startup, you're really looking for those passionate generalists, people who can do a little bit of everything, but they love your mission, and that focus on the mission is going to keep them going when things get hard or when they face a problem that they haven't had to solve before. As you move into the growth stage, you will start to require more specialized skills. And so your generalists who you had early on, you might need to start getting people who have a little bit more specific specific skill experience. So rather than having a full stack engineer or a couple of full stacks who can manage your whole product build, you might need to specialize into dedicated front end and back end. Or you might need someone who has experience in the regulatory space because you're moving from having a dependent license on another company to getting your own regulatory license. Those kinds of things start to change. Sorry, Dave, were you going to jump in here?
Yeah, I was going to say one thing to distinguish on the generalists. Generalists do a lot of things well. And to distinguish that from, there are also self-proclaimed generalists that don't know how to do anything and call themselves generalists as well. And I think it's really important to tease that out early on. You can probably do that not necessarily just in the interview process, but work on something together. Pick something to work on. You'll find which type of generalist you have on your hands as you're attracting talent.
Yeah, that is a really great tip. And I did that as well in my days as a founder with some sort of like big important hires that I needed to get right. But to reduce the risk, both for me and for them, having sort of like a 3-month project that we worked on together gave each of us an opportunity to test out if it was the right fit. All right, so we've done early stage into growth stage. You probably still are going to be able to find in the growth stage, as you start to increase your specialization, you're probably still going to find people who are aligned to your mission. But you might start thinking about mission alignment as less of a critical thing. And for my example, when we were at this stage at Future Super, so in the early stages, we were looking for absolute die-hard climate activists, people who were willing to do whatever it takes to save the planet. Whereas as we're getting more into the growth stages, we probably wouldn't hire a climate denialist, but we might hire someone who's a little bit earlier on in their sort of climate awareness journey, who we can sort of take on the journey with us and bring them closer to our mission. All right, let's move forward. So you've jumped over the first couple of hurdles. Your startup is growing. You've reached the scale up stage. So you're growing very quickly. By the time you get to this point, you've probably raised a bit of money or you're making enough revenue to be funding your growth. And so this is where you can start to think about hiring for specific skills and hiring for experience that people can bring with them to help your business. You'll be focusing more at this point on skills and mission alignment. So instead, your onboarding process becomes so critical here because that's how you bring these highly skilled people who aren't necessarily connected to your mission. That's how you connect them to your mission as part of the onboarding process. So you can start to afford to pay for experience because you can pay for better salaries, and the potential value of any equity that your hires are getting starts to look less risky and more likely to turn into something.
This point too is really often a very transitional point for the founder who started as a generalist. The CEO is often the first salesperson, the first product manager, the first fundraiser. At this point, sometimes founders start to question their own role with the company and where they belong and start to become more of a specialist themselves, or even bring someone in to fill what was their role. So this is a founder transitional point too.
Yeah, love that. And then just to close this out as well for completion, I haven't even got an arrow drawing to it. That's how unusual it is to go that far, how rare it is. But by the time you get back to large enterprise, that's where once again you're really focusing on these generalist skill sets, but you're hiring for experienced generalists. So that might be your national manager or your sort of regional general manager, people who can manage larger teams and multifunctional teams without necessarily having that same connection to the mission. So that's the dream, that we'd all love to get to that point where we can hire back experienced generalists, but it is quite unusual. So something else to think about here when you look about how this movement of the balance between mission alignment and skill proficiency changes is, as Dave said, it happens for the founder and CEO as well. The needs of your company will change. And so you need to make sure that your development keeps ahead of the needs of the company. But you also have to think about the development needs of your early team members. These are often your early stage generalists, your most loyal mission aligned team members, and they will either need to change and focus their skill set as the company grows, or you'll have a problem where they're not keeping up with the needs of the company anymore, and those people will either end up leaving or you'll have to ask them to leave. And this is super tough because these are the people who got your company going in the early days. They're the die-hard mission aligned people who just absolutely love the business that you're building. But if you're not thoughtful, if they're not able to transition their skills and their experience from that generalist, a little bit of everything, to a more specialized role as the company grows, then there's going to reach a point in time where they no longer fit. And that can be okay. Not everyone is cut out to work in a large business, just as not everyone is cut out to work in an early stage startup. But it is something to be quite mindful of, especially as you start to hit those stages where your team is growing really quickly. Dave, I don't know if you have thoughts to add on that.
Maybe just an observation of that point in time to see sometimes these discussion leads around values have changed, or morals or vision has changed. Oftentimes it has not. It's just the size of the company has changed, for all the points that Kirstin's making. So distinguishing that with your team of values, mission, is different than just the size of the company and the stage changing. But those can really get murky, and having transparent discussions around that is really important. Did the vision change? Did the culture change? Or is it just the size of the company changed and the macro environment changed in some way? They're different themes and can impact people differently as well.
Yeah, great point. And for anyone on the call who does have a larger team, I'm sort of thinking like 20 to 30 plus large in startup land. But if you're starting to have some of your longer term employees, like get really nostalgic about the good old days, that can be a sign that something's not fitting with them and that they're not as happy in their role as they used to be. So just watch out for that kind of like, oh, back when we were small, there's the really positive side of that, but then there's when it starts getting a little bit negative, a little bit sort of detracting from the experience of the company today by wishing for the company as it used to be.
I get really nervous when I hear this is how we've always done it.
Yeah, great point. All right, here's a couple of quick pitfalls for you, something that I see early stage founders fall into the trap of a lot. So the first one is creating an exciting job versus a necessary job. And I think this has a lot to do with, a lot of early stage founders, especially if it's the first time founding a company, you feel a little bit awkward about bringing someone in to do the parts of the job that you don't like. And so instead you try and make this job sound really interesting and really exciting so that you can recruit this great person. But instead, I would challenge you to think about finding someone who can complement you. So if you hate this particular part of the grunt work, you need to find the person who loves that, who gets out of bed in the morning to do whatever it is that drives you crazy. And if you can do that, then everyone loves their job and you're all thriving.
Yeah. And if it's the stuff that drives you crazy, you're probably not very good at it.
Exactly. All right person, wrong time. So this happens a lot, I think, when you find someone who you really, really connect with on the mission, or you really like them as a person, you'd love to bring them across to your company. But quite often there's someone who might be a better hire at a larger stage. Maybe they have a specialization that you don't quite need in that specialist track just yet, or full-time specialist track. You might need someone who's got a little bit more generalist ability, but that person might have trouble taking on tasks outside of their field of expertise. And so if you hire too early on for specialization, or if you hire too early on for someone who's got experience, who's not able to transition to that super scrappy little bit of everything environment that we have in early stage startups, that can be a really painful lesson for you and for your hire. Dave, is that something you've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe if we keep tracking out these pitfalls, a lot of times there are not check-in points on someone joining a startup with how they are progressing and what are they struggling with, and you find out when things are not repairable. So I build right into your culture. If someone's coming in as a founder or early hire, really frequent check-in points to how they are progressing with being a generalist or desiring to be a specialist. Sometimes it might seem like you hired the wrong person, but if we go back to the bus, they're just in the wrong seat on the bus.
Yeah, spot on. And that's kind of the next point here. So right person, wrong job, right person, wrong seat. As we've sort of said, you can see this over time with your early stage employees if they're not able to specialize and keep their skills up to date with what the company needs. But it can also be, you hire someone. I hired someone one time who was a really great product marketing specialist, but what I needed was a marketing generalist. And so it was just too much of a learning curve for that person. And for them, it felt like they were moving away from their specialization that they'd spent years developing. And so that can sort of happen a lot as well. Lastly, just a quick point here around unclear expectations around career development. Again, I see a lot of founders when they probably around the sort of 5 FTE mark in a business, they start feeling this pressure to have job descriptions. Whereas actually there's not a lot of point writing a job description in an early stage startup, I think, because your job is everything and it changes every day. And so rather than thinking about how do we document what our job description is and what our career development pathways are in those early stages, think instead about today's point earlier on, how do you pitch the reality of what this job is? Startups are much more like an apprenticeship model than they are a traditional corporate career ladder. And so finding people who want to learn on the job, they want to take control of their own professional development. They want to work with you and the rock stars around you. They want to find their own mentors. Those kind of people who can craft their own career development path in amongst the excitement and chaos of a startup are the ones who are really going to thrive. The people who want a clear description of what is their job and what is not their job are probably going to struggle when it comes to some of those gray areas. So Dave,
probably a good red flag in the process of developing a team. If someone's asking for a lot of depth on job description, it may be a signal that startup is not for them.
Yeah, great point. All right, I'm going to come off slide share here because that's the extent of our formal presentation, but would love to jump into questions. So Andrea, I think you're going to summarize the chat for us.
Yes, so we already have some questions for everybody else. There's lots of time. Put anything that you have in the chat. The Q&A is not working correctly right now, but the chat is, so just start popping in your questions in there, please. All right, so the first question that we have for both of you guys, what agreements should I need to prepare and make first for my team as a CEO and founder?
I'd start with founder agreements as early as possible. That those discussions get more and more difficult the more you add value. When you're sort of worth zero, it's a much easier discussion. So I would start with the founder agreements. And I know it sounds strange when you're a couple people with an idea to have things like bylaws and stuff like that, but I would start with those. I would start with those founder agreements and cap table and that sort of thing.
Where can people get founder agreements and such?
Where can they get them? There are a couple one of the best free sources of templates is Cooley Go. It's a law firm that has put a lot of this. I'm also seeing a lot of people using some of the AI solutions now too. I don't want to mention anyone by name because I don't know the trustworthiness of them just yet. So I'm trying to avoid the Dave endorsed so and so. What do you think, Kirstin?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Founder agreement's super important. I mean, there's a bunch of like, corporate stand-up documents, shareholders agreement, those kinds of things that you'll need to have in place anyway. But I might just sort of touch quickly on employment agreements. And I know this probably changes, well, definitely changes jurisdiction to jurisdiction. It might even be quite different Australia compared to US. But I think with employment agreements, my advice to early stage founders is just make it as simple as possible. It's really easy to think about or to fall into the trap of wanting to have your employment agreement or your employment contract cover off every particular downside. But the reality is you're never going to litigate this document anyway. And so have a document that speaks to what you want this employment engagement to look like, covers all of the basics, but don't overthink it too much. You can always update your employment agreements over time as the company grows and as you need that sort of greater sophistication in the employment document.
One of those things where even doing it very, very poorly is infinitely better than not doing it at all.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Next question. As a solo founder, I'm inspired by world leaders like Jeff Bezos from Amazon and Jack Ma from Alibaba, and many more who achieved successful startups without co-founders. I'd rather wait for the right co-founder than risk getting a bad one. What resources and support systems can I leverage to build a high-performing team?
Did you go first on this one, Kirstin?
Yeah. So I actually joined my company Future Super as a late stage co-founder. They were a year post-launch when I came across, and I came across not initially as a co-founder. I came across as chief operating officer, and kind of we worked together for about a year before they recognized me as a co-founder. So I actually am really, really supportive of a similar kind of approach. And I love that you're taking this question seriously, because your co-founder is basically someone who you're going to spend more time with than your life partner. You want to make sure you get that decision right. And so things like that, late stage co-founder agreements, having a sort of trial period of working together can really help. And I think as well, if you Google 50 questions to ask your co-founder, there's a great sort of document to help you work through some of those foundational alignment questions around, is this actually the right person for me to work with long term? I don't think it changes how you build the team around you, whether you're a sole co-founder or a co-founder team, sole founder or a co-founder team. But I do think the best co-founder relationships have a balance of skills. And so together, the two or three of you together will be like this absolute rock star founder CEO, but you have 2 or 3 FTEs worth of time to deploy your skills. If you're a sole co-founder, you need to find that skill balance in your executive team and in your board and advisors. So you will have to be a lot more self-aware, I suppose, about your strengths and your gaps so that you can hire for those and secure those in those other supporting roles.
Makes sense.
I don't know if this would be helpful or not, to share a little philosophy on solo founders is probably the most common question, at least I received on my my application process. There are investors that will not invest in solo founders, and there are investors that will. And I like to simplify things, and I saw a couple different kinds of solo founders. I'll just break it into sort of two themes. The first theme is this founder is going to get started and nothing is going to stop them, and nothing's going to stop them from starting whether they have a team or not. They'll attract the right people along the road at some point. There's nothing that says founders have to be founders at the same point of the starting line. There are other solo founders that my instinct was they're solo founders because people don't want to work with them. The first category is great. We have solo founders in my current class right now because they're in the category of they're an unstoppable founder and they're going to attract the right people at the right time. And that's perfectly acceptable. So the Jeff Bezos comment, I'd say none of them are building a company on their own. That's the thing that I really want to avoid, is you just can't do it on your own. At some point, you can't scale yourself for the day.
Exactly. Thank you. Let's continue a little bit more about founders. Tracy wants to know, two-part question. What would you recommend as the max amount of founders? Second, how do you differentiate between having a software or an engineer as a founder versus an employee?
You want to go, Dave?
Sure. The number to me is less important than the balance. And real simply put, when I look at companies applying to our program they're going to invest in, the most highest weighted variable is the team. By far, it's significantly above all the others. And there's a lot of things to look for on the team from a skill set diversity standpoint. I'm looking for balance. Is there someone whose core skill set passion is building? Is there someone whose core skill set passion is selling in some way? At its very basics, that's kind of what a startup's doing, building something and selling something. And I don't know who to attribute this quote is, but I use it all the time. If I see a team of all MBAs, nothing is ever going to get built. And if I see a team of all engineers, nothing is ever going to get sold. The number matters less than me. With that being said, I don't see too many go above the number 4 co-founders.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm less concerned about the number and more how they work together. And if I can, again, just give you a little example, in my experience as a founder, we had 3 co-founders by the time I was recognized as one of them. We had the kind of the seller, we had the technical person, and then we had me, who was the builder. And I used to always say, we are a perfectly rounded CEO, the 3 of us, and we have 3 people's worth of time to do our job. And while ever the cost of managing and coordinating between the 3 of us is lower than the impact of having 3 people to deploy their time, then we are winning. But as soon as that balance tipped, that was when it sort of became clear to me that it was the right time to leave. And one of the other co-founders left as well. And the one co-founder ended up staying on to run the business and is still there and doing amazingly well. So you can be quite mindful of that. And it should be a really live conversation between you and your co-founders around how are we working together, retroing on your relationship and your way of working, because it has a massive impact on the rest of the business when it starts to get unsteady.
Yeah.
And to that early employer part of the question, I might ask, I experienced this. We brought in a 4th co-founder very, very late, not the same equity and that sort of thing, but being a co-founder may or may not be really, really important to someone. And I would ask that coming onto this startup, we're a 3-person team. The individual I'm thinking of told me, he's like, being a co-founder is really, really important to me. So then we went back with the original founders and said, how do we optimize for this or not? There's another company in my class that right now that brought in a engineer, and the CEO talked to that person about, do you want to grow into the CTO role, a co-founder? And they said, not yet. So have that conversation and really tease out any team. What's really important to you in this role? What are you trying to, that can help you build your team, is what they actually desire.
Yeah. One last question about founders and finding founders is, when you are a non-tech founder, how do you go about finding tech co-founders and tech hires?
Don't be one of those people chasing engineers around. We'll start with that. Kirstin, I'll go after you.
Oof, yeah, this is probably the most common question I get asked anyway, is how do you find a technical co-founder? Look, I don't know that there is any one answer. Start with your networks. Do you know people who have that technical capability? Is there a way that you can access it, outside of a kind of co-founder role, in order to get to a point where you have an MVP of the product to be able to show someone? Is there a way that you can shortcut that process by using no-code tools and get yourself up to speed on no-code, again, so that you can get to a point where you've got a minimum viable product, an MVP version that you can actually use to start getting traction. Because I think engineers, in my experience, are really excited by solving problems. And so if you've got something that you can use to draw them into the problem that you're solving, to show them that customers have this problem, and to get them excited about the impact that they could have building and solving that problem, it's a much easier sell than if you're just trying to pitch an engineer to come and join as your technical co-founder based on the vision alone, unless they have that problem or someone they know and love has that problem and they feel it deeply already. So that would be my thoughts, Dave. I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, I think back to the one of the early slides that you had in there on mission versus skill set, and I think technology is just a medium, and usually engineers and CTO types are passionate about other things first. I would start with mission alignment. And if you're passionate about, let's say, education or healthcare, what organizations are you part of that you're already aligned on those values and that mission? And then you meet people that also have a technical skill set or a business development skill set. So I would start with the mission alignment and spend time with that tribe first, and you'll bond over that mission first, which I think is more important. That's why I asked the prioritization question to Kirstin earlier, because I want to hear how she thought about it. So I would really start with spending time in the area that is mission aligned and passion aligned. Fill in this, then the people with the skill sets will sort of emerge, and you already have a bond at that point.
Love it.
Awesome. Love it. Let's move over to culture a little bit. We had a few culture questions. The first one is, how do you even develop a culture during the very, very early stages of a startup?
I mean, early stages of a startup, the culture is you, right? And so you as the founder need to be super aware of what are your personal values. What is it that's driving you to do the impossible thing of starting a business to try and solve it? And to the extent that you can, try and document that. You know, there's a bunch of stuff that you can look at which can take you through purpose, mission, vision, values, those kind of exercises, putting it down in writing and using that when you're talking to your early hires. You know, what is it about this problem that's got you working to solve it? How do you think about values? What do you see as the culture of the business as the company grows? And the more you can articulate your own purpose and values and understand how they impact the culture of the business that you're building, the more you'll be able to intentionally grow that as the business grows.
I completely agree. It's at this stage, it's 100% about your actions and avoiding that temptation of we'll do it later. So the companies in my class right now are building their impact maps and how their company is to impact the world and measuring impact. And it's very easy to say, well, we're so young, we don't need to measure impact yet. We'll do it later. But the action of doing it right from the outset is not only going to build the muscle, it's going to go back to that. Who are you going to attract to work with you and stay with you as well? So I agree with Kirstin. Building is all about your actions. It just speaks tremendously louder than anything you put on the wall.
There, for anyone who's kind of like book nerd like me, there's a great book that can help you think through this called Scrambled by Marty Neumeier. It is a business book cross beach read. So it makes it super easy to get through, but it also just talks through a bunch of exercises that you can use to think through purpose, vision, values. Great resource for early stage companies. But also I used a bunch of those exercises with my team when we were at the sort of 50, 60 FTE stage, and it worked really well.
Nice. So now we just talked about beginning of the startup, that's the culture, follow-up questions to that. Since the company culture can change as the startup grows, do original values matter less when hiring new people as the company scales?
I think they matter more as the company scales. That's when it's easy for it to get off the North Star in some way, especially if you're hiring fast. Sometimes you see companies hitting that Series A, B, and they're hiring 40 people this month, 40 people next month. That's a much easier goalie to get by. So I'd say my opinion is it matters even more.
Yeah, I agree. I do think the values will evolve over time. I know we sort of did a values reset. Well, the first time we articulated our values, we were about 10 or 15 people in the business. So I was late stage, otherwise we would have done it earlier. But 10 or 15 people, and then we did it again at about 50. And what we found was the purpose stayed the same, but we kind of recrafted it in more mature language, I guess. The mission and vision had evolved, and so we were able to refine that, but the values actually stayed the same. The values were sort of quite core to who we were, but the way we thought about how we applied them, what the values meant when it was in excess. So if you applied the value too strongly, these are the mistakes you can make, versus if you don't apply the value strongly enough, these are the mistakes you can make. And so we had that level of conversation at the kind of 50, 60 people stage to reinforce the values and to evolve them as we grow. But one of our values was get shit done. And I'm pretty sure now, as a $15 billion funds under management business that's conducted multiple acquisitions, I'm pretty sure that's not a value that they continue to hold in the business today. But they would have replaced it with something that kind of had the same vibe, but maybe a little bit less scrappy startup feel about it.
Yeah. Okay. Another culture question. What kind of tips do you have on how the best way to let people go if they're not a great fit? Any way to make it easier, especially if they are some value, they just don't happen to be a good culture fit?
You want to start, Dave?
Yeah. First of all, just an observation. It's when someone's let go, I find it in a startup anyway, very rare that they're surprised. They've known intuitively that something is not working, something is not a fit. I'm a believer that people deserve the exact same level of respect coming in the door as they deserve going out. With that being said, and why I don't think people are shocked is my guess is conversations, hopefully from a leadership perspective, have already been happening. Something's not working. Maybe they switched positions. Maybe they started working on different projects. I think the most respectful thing you can do to someone you have to let go is be completely honest with them and support them as they're taking a step towards their next chapter, whatever that means. It could be referrals, whatever it takes. So I think total honesty and the exact same level of respect out the door as they got coming in.
Yeah, I agree. Letting people go is super hard, especially when you've put a lot of effort into finding them in the first place, only to realize that it actually is the wrong hire. The worst way I think you can let people go in an early stage business is set up a formal meeting, come in with a long list of the reasons why you're letting them go and all the reasons why they've sucked at their job, and then give them a notice and walk them out the door. Like, it is so grating and so humiliating for that person in a small business if that's kind of the way they get let go, because the question is, well, why didn't you tell me earlier? You know, like, I work with you every day. How come I'm only finding this out now? I think much better is just having a really open, direct conversation with them. And it can just be, you know, it can be very vulnerable for you as a person letting them go to admit that part of the problem is, you know, what you need and what you thought you needed in this role. And so, you know, being super direct about, look, it's just not working out. And, you know, I think you probably feel it as well. We've had a lot of conversations about this, of trying to get things back on track. But I'm just not feeling that it's working. And, you know, it's not adding the value that, you know, this working relationship is not adding the value that the business needs. And so I've come to the decision to let you go. The more direct, but also empathetic you can be, the more that person is going to feel human in that conversation. And I think at all times, treating people with dignity and respect on the way out is just a really good mantra. Literally every time I have to let people go, I repeat to myself, like, dignity and respect, dignity and respect. Like, that is how I want this person to feel that they're treated. And so how can I manage this process in a way that delivers that outcome for them?
I think it was really important what Kirstin said about if this is a performance let go, that the phrase you said was, we've had a lot of conversations about this. So you've been working on it together. So there's no surprise if there's not working. Where my answer changes, if there's really values misalignment or any lines of integrity, my answer really changes for that. And letting someone go, let's say integrity is a high value of mine because they broke integrity in some way. Letting someone go because they violated that value is going to reinforce the value for the rest of the team, and reinforce your hiring rather than letting it go. So my answer changes it if it's a something unethical.
Totally 100% agree with that. I might just add as well, I see a lot of founders really struggle at about the sort of Series A, Series B stage to hire and retain senior people. You start seeing this kind of revolving door of senior managers who come in, they last less than their probation period, and then they leave. And there is a trap, I think, that founders can fall into of blaming those individual hires. You know, this person was the wrong fit. This person couldn't transition to startups. This person, whatever, couldn't survive in the hustle culture that we have here, which can all be true. But as the founder, you also need to take the lessons for yourself. And if you've had a couple of fast churning employees come into the business and leave straight away, you need to be looking at what's going on in your hiring process. That means you're hiring the people who can't make it in your environment, and you need to look at what's going on in your culture and your leadership style. That is meaning that these people aren't living up to the promise that you saw in them when you gave them the job in the first place. So I think both sides, and that probably applies at all stages. If you're having to let someone go, yes, you should manage that conversation really well and treat that person with dignity and respect. But you should also do a little retro on the business, the culture, what did we learn about what we're actually looking for in this role that we can apply when we make our next hire so that we don't make this mistake again.
Great. Let's go on the flip side. Instead of letting people go, this question is very specific, so we can talk broad if you can answer this specific question. If you are post-launch, how much equity do you need to give a great team member with 3.5% equity to upgrade them to a co-founder?
Oh, great question. This probably changes company to company. I mean, I can tell you my specific thing. I joined about a year post-launch. I think my initial equity offer was 1%, and then my co-founder equity offer took me up to 7 or 8. So still significantly lower than the early stage founders. But to me, that was fair because I took less risk in joining the business than they did. But I think the right number is probably the one that helps your new co-founder feel motivated and incentivized, and to feel like they share in the upside of the business, but doesn't feel too reckless for you and your board and your investors to have given away. You can also think about how you stagger the vesting period for that person as well. When I moved from being an employee to a co-founder, I got a chunk of my new equity vested up front in recognition of that position, but I also had the majority of it was spread out over a vesting schedule over 6 or 7 years. And so that was kind of how we balanced it to make sure that I had that kind of, that real, like heartstrings feeling of I'm an owner, I'm a co-founder in this business, but also I was only sort of getting the full recognition of that if I stayed a co-founder amount of time.
I think that co-founder title is more meaningful than it is associated with a number of shares. So you could be a co-founder at 3.55%. I think if you're moving someone to a co-founder, the question is more amongst the original co-founders, what are you comfortable reallocating the founder? And that could open up employee pool shares as well. So I don't think it's so much about the number. With that being said, I don't think I've ever seen a co-founder cap table less than 10, 5% or around there. But it's less about the number and more about the founders have started this company. They have founder shares. To bring on a co-founder later, they're reallocating their own shares. They have to feel strongly about that person doing that, and then setting up the same vesting.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say it depends on the stage as well. Like if you're bringing a co-founder in at pre-seed on 7%, they're probably not going to feel like a meaningful partner. Whereas if it's sort of later Series A, Series B, and you've got 7%, then, you know, that's quite a big chunk of the business once you've diluted a couple of times with investors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great point. And co-founders don't have to be equal shares.
Yeah.
I often at the pre-seed stage see everyone like, we'll divide by 3, we'll divide by 4, whatever the case is.
Okay, let's get another specific question. So now that your legal hats are on, do you have a recommendation for incorporation? Should the CEO founder do that and then update the C Corp as people join the team? And any good recommendations on lawyers who create C Corps?
This is not a question for me.
You could probably create a C Corp by going to the state website, most common Delaware in the US. Company, it's also super easy just to do a LLC on your own, but to take investor money, you'll have to transition to a C Corp, which is pretty easy as well. Any lawyer can help you do that. I have a lot of great law firm recommendations. I don't think I want to go over a list of law firms now, just because I'll forget someone. And but start with that Cooley Go resource that I think John actually put in the chat. So thank you for doing that, John.
Yeah. Nice. If this person is in Australia, then hit me up. I can introduce you to some great startup lawyers. But I would just echo Dave's point there that like you can update these things as you go. You can start out with a basic registration, and then as you get to a point where you're raising capital, you can update your shareholders agreement, your constitution. So don't overthink it. Don't try and plan for this is the constitution or whatever that we have to have in place when we're a multinational business. You'll redraft that thing many times between where you are now and where you're ultimately going to end up.
Great point.
Fantastic. We have only a couple of minutes left, so I want to start closing out on questions, but I do want to ask Kirstin and Dave if you guys can give us a last goodbye. A, how can people get in touch with you, or how can they ask questions if they wanted to? And B, if you can tell us a little bit more about your program one more time. If we can start with Kirstin, we have 3 more minutes.
Absolutely. So I'm a slave to the LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me on there. I'm /Kirstin Hunter. My program, Techstars, Tech Central Sydney, powered by New South Wales government, is an industry agnostic accelerator, technology agnostic. So we take 12 companies from whatever background. We are actually starting in a couple of weeks on the 9th of September, and then our program will run again the same time in 2025. So if you're thinking about moving to Sydney for Techstars, you've got a bit of time to prepare.
Who wouldn't want to move to Sydney? I'm similar to Kirstin. LinkedIn is a great place to reach me. So I'll put my email in chat right now. Reminder of workforce development program. Thesis is all about the force and workforce. So it's all about the people. And if you're creating a company that's helping maximize human potential in some way that allows someone to find, develop, succeed in their career or education, workforce development maybe for you. And you can, if you're unsure about what that means, take a look at the 12 companies that are in our class right now. They're all unique solutions, but all maximizing human potential in some way.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kirstin. Thank you, Dave. And thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.